In a recent episode on this channel, I performed a deep dive on Yes's classic song from their 1971 album, Fragile, Heart of the Sunrise. I discussed the circumstances under which the song was written, and from a musical perspective, did a portion-by-portion deconstruction of the song itself. Subsequent to that, I received an email from one of the viewers of the channel who suggested that I apply that approach to a favorite song of his, and it's also a favorite song of mine, one that I actually play in my prog band. And that will be the subject of today's episode. We're going to discuss at length the construction of Rush's classic song from their 1977 album, A Farewell to Kings, Xanadu. A Farewell to Kings is, at least to my ears, Rush's first fully formed progressive rock album. They had done progressive rock songs on their albums, of course, prior to the release of A Farewell to Kings, going back to their second album, Fly By Night, with By Tora the Snow Dog. Neil Peart's joining Rush in July of 1974 provided a lyrical edge to their composition efforts that resulted in a number of notable prog rock songs. But A Farewell to Kings really does establish them, again, in my opinion, as a prog rock band once and for all. On A Farewell to Kings, the band is focused mostly on longer form efforts. 3/4 of the album is devoted to just 3 songs on A Farewell to Kings. The album also features the first significant use of the Moog synthesizer by Geddy Lee with the band, an instrument that, of course, Rush would put to great use on future albums. Rush recorded A Farewell to Kings at Rockfield Studios in Wales during June and July of 1977. They had, at this time, just completed a tour of the United Kingdom. It was their first tour in the UK as headliners, and in general, they were beginning to just enjoy the success of their previous album, 2112, from a financial perspective. They were doing among their first headline shows in both Europe and in North America at this time as a result of 2112's success. 2112, of course, had its foot in the progressive rock water. The 2112 suite, comprising all of side 1 of that album and running close to 21 minutes in length, was very much a prog rock suite, complete with an overture that was an overture in the truest sense of the word, comprising pieces of all of the various musical segments of the suite. The rest of that album, however, was more straight-ahead rock and roll. Not to say that there was anything wrong with side 2 of the album. There are some songs there, like A Passage to Bangkok and Something for Nothing, that rank among the band's greats. But in moving forward with A Farewell to Kings, Rush would definitely embrace progressive rock in a very large way. Prior to recording A Farewell to Kings, Rush had done most of their recording near their homes in Toronto. They made the conscious decision, however, for this album to record away from home to give themselves a little bit of breathing room between themselves, their families, and the music press, in order that they could get down to business and construct something that they thought would be a worthy follow-up to 2112. They arrived at Rockfield with not very much music written for the album. Much of the composition would be done in the studio. But 2 songs had been composed and road-tested prior to getting to Rockfield. One of those was Closer to the Heart, which would be released by the band as a single. That, of course, was a shorter song, running about 2 minutes and 50 seconds. The other was Xanadu. Xanadu was a song that had its origins in the fact that Geddy Lee was a bit of a film buff. He was a fan in particular of the film Citizen Kane, the epic film made in 1941 by Orson Welles, who also starred in the film. In the film, the protagonist, Charles Foster Kane, lived in a palatial estate in Florida called Xanadu, which was essentially his escape from the world. The opening sequence of the film is done in the form of a newsreel that documents the death of Charles Foster Kane, and at the beginning of that newsreel, a quotation from Samuel Taylor Coleridge's poem Kubla Khan appears. The quotation from Coleridge, coupled with the discussion of the Xanadu estate that Kane held in Florida, gave him the first ideas around the song. Neil Peart, who of course was very interested in literature, did some work to explore the poem itself. In creating the lyrics for Xanadu, Neil Peart would, in addition to drawing inspiration from Coleridge's Kubla Khan, would also incorporate themes from another English literary work, James Hilton's 1933 novel, Lost Horizon. Lost Horizon was, of course, also made into a major motion picture in 1937 by the great American director Frank Capra. And in taking themes from both Kubla Khan and Lost Horizon, Peart comes up with a story that is, in some ways, original on its own. The protagonist of Xanadu ultimately becomes a man who is obsessed with the concept of immortality, searches for it at Xanadu, and ultimately achieves it, and lives for 1,000 years, only to discover that at the end of that time, that he's miserable and indeed, in his own words, becomes a mad, immortal man, by virtue of the fact that he has outlived all his friends and family and everything that he holds dear. The world is no longer recognizable to him, and that he's effectively outlived his own usefulness. It's an amazing story on Peart's part, taken from two amazing stories in their own right. Xanadu runs a total of 11 minutes and 5 seconds. It's very much constructed along the lines of what musicologists refer to as program music. Program music is a musical form where the story told by the music is told not only by the lyrics that are provided in a song or presentation, but also by the music, with various characters in the music, or in some cases, the characters' actions being represented by musical phrases or leitmotifs. Perhaps one of the most notable examples of program music that is familiar, at least to North American audiences, is a composition from the Russian composer Sergei Prokofiev in 1936 called Peter and the Wolf, where the piece in particular was written to introduce Russian children to musical concepts and how to identify musical keys and instruments. Incidentally, and I don't know whether this had any influence on Rush in their composition of Xanadu, but not long before Xanadu was written, a progressive rock version of Peter and the Wolf was recorded by various musicians in 1975. Robin Lumley, who would be one of the founders of the British fusion band Brand X, was behind this project, and he enlisted a number of British luminaries of the prog rock scene to assist him on this, including Gary Brooker of Procol Harum, the session guitarist Chris Spedding, Brian Eno, and the drummers Bill Bruford and Phil Collins, where Collins would later join Brand X himself. Neil Peart was certainly a big fan of both Bruford and Collins, and it's entirely possible that he might have been aware of this piece. Regardless of whether he was or not, it does strike me as an interesting coincidence, considering how Xanadu is constructed. As I mentioned, Xanadu had been played by Rush on the road prior to their entering Rockfield to record it for A Farewell to Kings. And one of the notable things about the song is that it was effectively recorded in a single take. Considering that the song runs over 11 minutes in length, this, when I first heard it, struck me as being somewhat implausible. Certainly most of the prog rock epics of the 1970s were recorded through the use of crossfades and editing in order to achieve the final product. Yes's producer, Eddie Offord, in particular, made something of a science of this, with songs like Yours Is No Disgrace and, most notably, Heart of the Sunrise and Close to the Edge being recorded in this manner, with the band not recognizing necessarily what the finished product would be until Offord was finished with his crossfades and edits. By comparison, Rush had constructed Xanadu on the road and had it ready for studio, and were able to perform it in sequence without a break upon arrival there. They performed the song in studio for Rockfield's house engineer, Pat Moran, initially to get levels on microphones and on their instruments. They did a quick playthrough of it to allow Moran to find the right settings. He reset the various levels, and then the band came back and played the music again from beginning to end. That is what we hear on A Farewell to Kings, is a single continuous performance. They do employ overdubs. There's a significant overdub at the beginning of the song in what I would refer to as the soundscape sequence of the song's overture. And Geddy Lee's vocals, of course, are almost certainly overdubbed. But the rest of that performance was done organically by the band in a single take. Something that gives you a sense of how terrific this band was in its prime. Xanadu, in total, runs 11 minutes and 5 seconds. And as I mentioned, it is constructed in several parts. The song is, at least in my opinion, very inspired by the work of Yes. In particular, there is a lot of similarity between Xanadu and Yes's song, Heart of the Sunrise. It does, in fact, strike me as somewhat interesting that I would receive a request to deconstruct this particular song, considering that there is a fair amount of influence, at least in my opinion, and positive comparison between Xanadu and Heart of the Sunrise. Although there is another Yes song that also plays into the construction of Xanadu, and that is something that is heard upon the very beginning of the song. Xanadu's first section I will refer to in this analysis as its overture. Heart of the Sunrise had an overture as well, which ran about 3.5 minutes. The overture of Xanadu runs for nearly 5 minutes and consists of several parts. The first part of the overture is what I'll call a soundscape. It consists of Alex Lifeson playing a significant part on guitar in the studio, one that might partially be improvised, but I suspect was relatively well thought out before recording it. That is merged with an overdub that was recorded outside in the garden at Rockfield Studios, which features Geddy Lee's and Neil Peart's contributions. Geddy is playing his Mini Moog synthesizer on this part, while Neil is playing wood blocks and in some cases tapping on the top of a picnic table that's situated outside the studio. The soundscape section runs for a considerable period of time, about 1 minute and 50 seconds. And because it's recorded outside, there are a number of ambient sounds that are picked up by the microphones, including those of various animals and birds chirping. This is, although somewhat different, reminiscent to me of the opening of Yes's Close to the Edge, with its sounds of bird noises and of running streams. Rush took a different approach that was perhaps somewhat accidental, maybe even unintentional, but nevertheless adds to the ambience of the piece. Following the soundscape is what I'll refer to as the Xanadu fanfare. This is a piece in 7/4 time in the key of E in the Mixolydian scale. Alex Lifeson is playing the lead here on guitar, with Geddy Lee following him, playing the theme in fourths on the bass guitar. This is really the hook that draws you into the song. The fanfare and the piece that follows it, which I'll refer to as the Xanadu theme, are the pieces of music that really draw the listener in. The Xanadu theme continues in E Mixolydian and is essentially a minute-long walk down of the E scale in order to then get to a more refined preamble of sorts, still in E Mixolydian, in which Geddy Lee in particular shows off his prowess on the bass. He is literally up and down the neck twice in the course of the playing of this section, ending with something of a fanfare of his own before they finally get to the main theme of the song itself. At this point, the song has gone on for almost 5 minutes, and indeed, it's not until the 4-minute 59-second mark of the song where Geddy Lee appears with his first vocal. The first words of the song are taken almost verbatim from Kubla Khan. If copyright restrictions were in force for a piece as old as Coleridge's poem, there aren't, of course. Coleridge's poem was written in 1797, but it almost would have deserved, if not a songwriting credit, at least an acknowledgement to Coleridge for the use of these words here. The quotation from Kubla Khan is then followed with the first verse of the song, which describes the protagonist's quest for immortality. This incorporates the first singing of the word Xanadu itself within the lyrics of the song. We then move on to the song's first chorus, and I call it a chorus for 2 reasons. The first is that we have now moved from a different key. Instead of the E Mixolydian scale, we've now moved on to D Mixolydian, but with a minor change to the scale. Instead of just providing the flatted 7th to the scale, as would be the case with a pure Mixolydian mode, Rush are here also incorporating a flatted 6th into the D scale. They haven't gone so far as to switch to the natural minor scale. They're not using the flatted 3rd note of the scale, only the flatted 6th and the flatted 7th. It gives the song something of an exotic character at this point. But that's one of 2 reasons why I refer to this as the chorus. The other is that in the 2 repeats of this section of the song, and there is a second repeat a bit later on, many of the words are deliberately reused. It's not a full chorus, there are some modifications, but they are very similar in content. Here in this first chorus, the protagonist has reached immortality and is triumphantly talking about how he will dine on honeydew and enjoy paradise. We come out of this chorus to a reprise of the Xanadu theme, the walk down the scale. From there we proceed directly to the second verse and then on to the second chorus. In the second chorus, the protagonist has now lived his 1,000 years. He has become the mad, immortal man and is lamenting the choices that he's made to get to this point. The song's lyrics end here, but the song is not yet complete. We transition out of the second chorus to the main theme of the song, which is now no longer augmented by lyrical content, but which supports a fairly lengthy and impassioned guitar solo from Alex Lifeson. This takes us to roughly the 10-minute mark of the song, where we transition to the Xanadu fanfare, also carried by Lifeson, and then a softer but dramatic close to the song to take us to the 11-minute mark where we end. A very, very impassioned performance by the band indeed. Xanadu would, of course, become a standard for Russian live performance. They would perform the song throughout the rest of their performing lives. And photos of Rush playing the song with Alex Lifeson holding his double-necked Gibson guitar and Geddy Lee with his double-neck Rickenbacker are somewhat iconic of the band. Alex Lifeson makes the comment in interviews that photos of he and Geddy with the double necks are probably the most common photographs of the band out there in the public domain. It is, as a musician, a song that I love playing. Our band does not have double neck guitars. Our lead singer, who does a wonderful impression of Geddy Lee as the vocalist on this song, likes to remark when we play the song that the song is such an impressive one from Rush, where it requires our band, which contains 5 members, to do the work of 3. It is indeed an amazing song. I'm assuming that most people who are watching this channel are well familiar with Rush and have at least a passing familiarity with the song. But if you're not terribly familiar with it, definitely give Xanadu a listen. This is, at least in my opinion, Rush's signature song, and it should be one of the very first songs that you hear from the band in order to make your first impressions about what this band is about. Anyway, that is the story of Rush and Xanadu. I hope you've enjoyed it. I am very thankful for the suggestion to have recorded this episode. It's one that I've enjoyed doing tremendously, in part because the song is one that is very familiar to me as a musician as well as an observer of progressive rock. So again, thank you very much. If you've enjoyed the episode, of course, please click like and let us know. By all means, leave comments. If you're not a subscriber to Progpaganda as yet, by all means, please join us. We would really appreciate your participation and love doing these videos for you. I will make the point also that as I'm recording this, the channel has just recently passed its threshold for YouTube monetization. We just recently, a day or two ago, signed on our 1,000 subscriber after just a year on the air. So this is a happy time for us. We're pleased to be here, and we are very proud that you've chosen to spend some time with us on a regular basis. Thank you all very, very much. We will be back soon. Until then, take good care. Bye-bye.